Hey peeps, welcome to another video. Today it is part 2 of the Vogue 8972 sew along. Today we're going to be assembling the front and back panels of our dress. So let's get started. With this dress we are going to be sewing it with a stretch fabric, so you will need to adjust your machine to a stretch stitch. You can use just a zigzag, and you want to reduce the width to about 1.5 and you want to increase the length to about 2.5, and that's going to be attaching seams together. If you have a actual stretch stitch, use that one, but I know a lot of machines don't, so I'm going to say this is a really good one for attaching seams to each other. I'm actually going to be doing the majority of construction on my overlocker, which you can totally do. Just bear in mind the seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch. We're going to be doing some finishing stitches on this one as well, and for that you're going to leave the length of your stitch the same, but you're going to increase the width to 2.5. So you have that as a zigzag, which will be visible on the outside of your garment. So as you know, I am making view E, but I'm adding the sleeves from view C. So we'll be following the steps to do those two dresses. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you have all of your notches in your pattern pieces. So the very first step that it would like you to do is stay stitch the sides of the bodice from the bottom notch up to the top. We don't need to do that, so we're going to move on to step number 2, which is attaching the side fronts to the front bodice. You want to match your notches up and sew at 5/8 of an inch. So the next thing that it wants you to do is top stitch along the front seams, and you can totally do that. For me, the only pieces that I'm going to top stitch are my waistbands, and I'm going to leave the rest of the seams unfinished like that. You don't need to do that, it's a decorative decision. So the next step is number 4, and again they want you to stay stitch the lower and upper edge of the front yoke. We don't need to do that, so what you need to do is attach it, pin it along, match your notches and sew 5/8 of an inch. So I've pressed the seams towards the centre bodice and I've pressed the seam of the yoke up towards the top. I'm now going to do the decorative top stitching, so secure it along this edge here, securing the seam allowance upwards. You can of course use a twin needle on this. I just happen to like the way the zigzag stitch looks, so I'm going to use that. I like to find a guide to run against this seam, so it's just the inside toe of my presser foot here, and I am just top stitching with the zigzags all along here. And there we have top stitching. So again, as I said, you can use your twin needle. If you have a cover stitch, you can use that. I haven't made friends with my cover stitch yet, which is why I'm using the zigzag, and I happen to like how it looks. Okay, so we can skip 7 and 8 because we are doing the wider skirt. So you're going to need to get your skirt front and 2 of your skirt sides. You should have 4 of those, and we are going to sew those together, matching up the notches. So the skirt front and the sides that you want to match to it have the single notch, and then the side seams actually have the double notch. So we're going to sew the skirt front to the skirt side, matching the single notch. Once you've sewn your skirt pieces together, you want to press your seam allowance to the centre front, and again, if you want to top stitch it, now's the time to do it. That's what the pattern calls for, but as I mentioned, I'm only top stitching the yokes. So the next step is a number 11, and we're going to attach the bodice that we have just made to the skirt that we've just made, matching the notches. Okay, so they actually want you to press the seam allowance towards the yoke, and I haven't done that. I've pressed mine towards the skirt and towards the bodice and then top stitched in there. So I have done mine differently, not wrongly, differently to the pattern, but you want to press your seam allowance whichever way you want and then top stitch whichever way you want. So looking at this diagram here, if I had been top stitching all of the seams, then top stitching where I had would look bad, but because I haven't done these lines of top stitching, because I've done it on the bodice and the skirt sections, I don't think it's going to look too bad. I'm not unpicking it anyway. So one of the wonderful things about scuba is that it doesn't fray, and you can, if you would like to, leave your hem raw and just leave it like that. You can leave it raw and turn it up if you want to. I'm going to overlock mine and then turn it up a little bit later, and that's just because I like the extra kick that it gives, and I am overlocking all of my other seams, so it feels sensible just to do that to the hem. So with the hem overlocked, I am now finished with the front panel of the dress. So I'm now going to do all the steps for the back. And the first one of those is to stitch bodice back to bodice side back. And bear in mind that our bodice back is now cut on the fold, so you will only have one piece, not two pieces. Once you've sewn your bodice back to your bodice side, press your seams towards the bodice back, so into the middle, and then if you want to, if you are, top stitch that seam. We're then going to move on to step number 15, which is stay stitching the yoke. We're not going to do that because we don't need to. We're just going to go straight ahead and attach the yoke to the bodice back and bodice sides that we've just sewn. So once you've sewn your back yoke on to the top of your bodice, you then want to mirror what you did previously. So for me, that meant pressing the seam allowance up and top stitching along that edge so that it mirrors the front of my dress. I'm now going to put together the skirt portion. So for the big skirt, we can skip ahead to step 22, and again we're going to sew the skirt back to the skirt sides, and remember our skirt back is cut on the fold, so you'll only have one of those pieces. You're going to match up the single notches because the double notches are for sewing the side seams together. You're going to do that, press, and if you are top stitching, top stitch. Once you've sewn your skirt panels together, you're going to want to press your seam allowance into the centre. You're also going to want to finish, if you're going to overlock and turn under your hem, you're going to want to finish it now. So we have just done steps 22, 23, 24, and we're now going to attach our skirt to our yoke. And obviously we're going to be doing it in one whole piece because we don't have the back seam. Once you've attached your bodice back to your skirt back, you're going to want to press and top stitch this seam in the same manner that you did with the front. For me, that's pressing and top stitching down towards the skirt, although the pattern calls for you to do it towards the yoke. Completely up to you. Do exactly the same type of top stitching that you did on your front piece. So this is where we really start deviating from the pattern. We don't need a back zipper, so we're not going to do any of that. That's nice. The next thing that it wants you to do is stitch the back to front at shoulders and sides. We are just going to stitch it together at the shoulders for the moment. Do not stitch the sides together yet. So you're going to want to match up your notches, and then what I've done is nest my seams. So I have one seam allowance going this way and one seam allowance going this way. Now I can do that because I haven't top stitched my seam allowances down, and although we've pressed all of them into the centre, I actually don't think it makes too much of a difference to nest it at the shoulder seam, and that's how I've done all of my other dresses, and it works really well. So you're going to then sew that together at 5/8 of an inch, and do that for the other shoulder too. So the next thing that we want to do is stabilise our shoulder seams with some clear elastic, and I like to keep mine on the roll so I don't cut a length. I lay it on top of the seam that I have just sewn, and then I'll go over it with a zigzag stitch to secure it in place. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section down below and I will do my best to answer them. I really hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye!